Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Backlog Banter. My name is Tucker Hazel. Today, I'm joined by Joe Wright, my real-life actual friend from college, and we are here today to talk about Silent Hill 2 Remake, Bloober Team's 2024 remake of the 2001 PS2 classic, a game that you really like, but that 2001 game, a game I have not played. And so we're here to discuss the game, completely spoiler full. Like, here's your warning. If you haven't beaten the game, just leave. Don't give us your view. And we're going to talk about it, sort of the differences between it and the original, the remake and the original, and also our perspective on it, you being a fan of the original and a fan of the remake, and me coming in completely blind to the remake, but also having some experience with Silent Hill. I've played Silent Hill 1, and also just horror games in general. But Joe, you really love Silent Hill.
I do.
You have a Silent Hill 2 disc carpet in your apartment. So talk about your infatuation with this game.
Well, funnily enough, and I'll go on to
here's the question: will you get a PS5 disc Silent Hill 2 carpet as well to go with it?
I forget what the PS. I think the PS5 disc has the. Oh, I remember what the disc looks like. It's really cool. You know, there was a hole here. It's gone now.
Oh,
they have that right over the little disc hole.
Oh, that's fun.
That's a pretty good one.
Yeah, that's cool.
I think that would be a really good carpet rack.
Yeah.
So yeah, I see a good enough deal, and I got to get the whole suite.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I really love this series, man. And obviously, this channel's been missing a Silent Hill enjoyer, so
Correct,
I'm so happy to contribute.
I don't think we've ever talked about any Silent Hill game.
Goodness, never. I know you talk about the Resident Evil early games, especially like
occasionally.
4 and 4 remake and such.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, this was a series. Funnily enough, I feel like a lot of experiences when I've watched videos talking about people's love for the games, there's been a lot of it in early childhood or in developing years.
Yeah.
And for me, it was really simple. I just had the urge to get through them all and downloaded them all on my Steam Deck earlier this year and ran through the 4 original ones in the span of essentially 2 to 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And was completely enraptured. It's like, have you ever... I mean, I'm sure this happened to you. You just happen upon a game that just feels perfectly designed to your tastes and inclinations, and you just can't stop, and you go through each and every one. Exactly how I felt as soon as those little baby demon creatures kill you in the beginning of Silent Hill 1. And it's like, I just know I'm here, and I'm happy to be here.
Yeah.
But yeah, I played through all of those, not even really in prep for the remake, though I didn't know it was happening at that time.
Yeah.
But just felt deeply and madly in love with it, and then went through the cycle of perceived mourning, seeing and being oddly concerned about Silent Hill 2 remake.
As many people were.
As many people were with early trailers. But besides the point, I really love this remake just as much as I love the original game and hold it probably in high regard. You asked me on the right day if I think it's the best game ever made. I'll probably tell you maybe on like a Thursday or Friday. Then on Monday and Tuesday, I'm more Mario because I want to feel Super Mario Galaxy because I want to feel happier about myself. But yeah, seeing as someone that completely adores that original game, I think the remake's fantastic. It's stellar.
It's going to be an interesting one to track over time in terms of how people fall in love with the series, because I really do think that this Silent Hill 2 remake, being the first major new Silent Hill game in over a decade, and also the first like well-received one in longer than that, that this is going to be a full force entry point for a lot of people. And there are a couple of other Silent Hill games in production, but this Silent Hill 2 remake is fantastic. I mean, it's phenomenal. I played and liked Silent Hill 1, but as someone who doesn't have a reverence for the series, I was surprised by how much this appealed to me. And I think that's because it is able to strike a really interesting balance of maintaining some of the spark and charm in moments and design elements of an older game, but without the design hindrances that I sometimes struggle with older games in terms of camera and control and pacing and things. And also, this is a very different game from the original. It is based on similar story beats. It's based on similar locations, but the maps are redone in major ways. There are new story scenes. There's new voice acting and motion capture and new enemy types and like new puzzles and things.
Almost 9 hours of new music,
and that's what 9 hours of new music, and also 9 hours of new gameplay.
Basically,
because this is just a expanded version. But I actually want to start there in terms of the biggest difference between the original and this is just how long they are. Exactly. The original is you can finish in like 7 to 8 hours. It's pretty condensed, and you're moving through the areas very quickly. But Silent Hill 2 Remake really lets you sit in these areas. And Makes it a much longer game and a much more substantial experience. I think might be able to talk about why they made that choice to sort of expand it in the modern market. But as someone who had not played the original and
Mhm.
did not know what to expect in terms of pacing and puzzles and areas, this to me felt so natural. I
Mhm.
was going through these areas and someone would be like, "Oh, that wasn't there in the original. You
Mhm.
couldn't do that in the original. That puzzle wasn't there in the original." And I'm playing through it and there's no difference in quality in my mind. It's just like, this is just what it is. This is how it is. And it was continuously enjoyable.
Exactly.
Continuously enjoyable. I really fucked that one up.
Continuously enjoyable.
Yes.
Yeah, it felt really natural to me too. And I know that's been one of the main dialogue points about this game.
Sure.
And maybe more over the course of, let's just call it pacing to be
Mhm.
nice about it. And
But
I
it's
do
probably
really,
the biggest criticism overall that most
yeah,
people have.
especially, and I understand some of the criticisms about it, but I'm not here to talk about the criticisms. I'm here to talk
Sure.
about how much I really love this
Yeah, yeah,
game.
yeah.
My first playthrough of this game took around 18
Mhm.
hours, and I was letting it linger. Let's tell you that
Sure.
much. I was going through every individual area, examining every little thing on the wall,
Yeah.
trying to get brand new story beats, and then I felt like I come through everything so well. And then, of course, I end up missing like 6 memos and 2
Oh, sure.
remembrances. And
Yeah.
then every single day, as I see on Twitter or the subreddit, there's a brand new thing someone discovers about a tiny environmental detail that
Mhm.
explains a story beat or some
Sure.
info about a character. I'm just amazed by how much they packed into it. But
Yeah.
18 hours on the first run, and I don't know, I really hadn't been that enveloped in a game, just wanted to keep pushing and
Yeah.
pushing and pushing since honestly, like FromSoft games, like
Sure.
Elden
Oh,
Ring, I
definitely.
was
Yeah,
there
yeah, yeah.
night after night after night.
Mhm.
And Silent Hill, I felt the same way. And what
Interesting, yeah.
I think the thing when I think about pacing with this game and is that it always we're always moving forward.
Sure, yeah.
And I know in some areas, like sometimes some things that can take a long time is Silent Hill 2. And it's funny watching some streamers now play it for the first time. Maximilian Dude had a
Yeah.
really good playthrough of Silent Hill
Sure.
2. But it's funny, even hit with his perspective of someone that's been playing games for God knows how long.
Mhm.
There are some areas where he got stuck in, and maybe 30
Hmm.
minutes of time ends up being, well, what do I combine to get into this?
Oh,
What do
interesting.
I, where's the next place that I
Yeah,
go?
yeah.
Didn't feel like a clear sort of direction.
So
And
it can definitely be variable depending on the person, their experience, their puzzle solving ingenuity,
yeah,
their how used to this style of game they are.
yeah, indefinitely. And probably a controversial take on my own point, but I don't mind playing games with a guide in
Yeah.
mind,
No,
even if
neither
you
do I.
look up things for
Yeah.
reference. There's no diminishment to me in terms of quality, like especially for Souls games are the
Mhm.
biggest
Yeah.
reference for
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
And there are definitely some areas, like especially in Silent Hill 1, where I absolutely love the game, but going just trying to discern it just on your own can
Mhm.
definitely take a while
Yeah.
at times. So I had no issues at all looking at maps, and it made my experience much more enjoyable. And there's definitely some times where I did that in Silent Hill 2 as well,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
I found that to be really enjoyable. But I think one of the things that stands out to me about the length in this game,
Sure.
first of all, is that it was all things I was interested in,
Yeah.
especially with the town and how much it's expanded.
Definitely. Yeah.
The part that really blew my mind is as soon as you go to Silent Hill, the first shop that's in front of you is the
Yeah.
flower shop.
Mhm.
And in the original, there's like a little health drink that's outside, but you try to get it as much as you can. You can't do it.
Mhm.
And then the remake, try your best will be like, screw it. Let's just see if we can get into this building. And you can.
Yeah.
And it's the tiniest thing. But I had a kaboom moment where I was like, okay, if I can get into the flower shop building,
Yeah.
what other buildings in the main town can I
Exactly.
get in?
Yeah.
Because as much as these games are called Silent Hill, and frankly, all the games, I think in Silent Hill 1, you spend the most time in the
There's definitely a
town.
lot of time in that. Yeah.
In Silent Hill 4, you don't even go to Silent
Oh,
Hill. In
okay.
Silent Hill 3, there's like 30 minutes of time
Hmm.
actually spent in the town. And then Silent Hill 2 Original, again, you only explore it in the morning when you meet with Maria, and then when you go to the town for a bit at night.
Yeah.
And being able to actually go through this town and feel like it's this lived in space
Sure. Yeah,
and see
absolutely.
all these stories that are there,
Yeah.
it just enhances my love for it, and it clearly shows how much Bloober Team loved it.
Yeah, I think that your comparison to Souls games is apt in environmental storytelling,
Mhm.
which is what this game and specifically the remake really allows for, and
Yeah.
why I think it's such a special game. You talk about that moment of entering the flower shop, and it's not just entering the flower shop, and it's pretty cool. But if you want to, you can take your time and really look at all of the detail work that goes into making this area feel tonally distinct from the
Mhm.
area around it. The crunched up with dead leaves on the floor that are like scattered around in an interesting way, and the light shining through like the broken window that's like up high on the wall, and different plants that are like kind of decaying. They really put a lot of effort into each area being rich with detail
Mhm.
of lots of unique
Yeah.
environmental items, lots of unique props and elements that. And then there will be newspaper clippings that are
Exactly.
rendered out, and I think there is one of those or a note or something in the flower shop. But Silent
Yeah.
Hill does feel like an actual place in this
Mhm.
game, and that is because many of the buildings have been modeled, and you can explore their interiors. And the set dressing in them is very high production value and lots of little detail and things I was mentioning, but also because there's just more to do in the
Mhm.
town. There's more things to find, more little hidden secrets, more health drinks and things that you can discover.
Yeah.
But also another fun change of this game is that you can smash windows,
Exactly.
which is really really goofy, especially because James is just kind of a guy. But the fact that you can smash windows allows you to, or allowed me to really pay attention to the environment
Mhm.
and pay attention to which windows are boarded up or partially covered with a curtain or something. Okay, I can't damage those, but it made me like peer in the window of every single building down the street because I'm like, well, I might even just find like it might be a health drink or it might be a little tchotchke or a collectible or
Mhm.
something. But I wanted to look in those
Yeah.
because if it's a boot shop or a gun shop or whatever it is, they have the proper set dressing in there. And so
Exactly.
not only was I engaged with it on a mechanical level because I was able to smash the windows and get shit,
Uh-huh.
and some of which I could explore, but also because each one was accurately and detailed rendered. So there's always something cool to look at.
Exactly. Yeah. And what you were talking about, noticing which places are boarded up, and I
Mhm.
especially noted this on my replay of the game to end up getting the platinum
You
for
did.
it.
So you played it through
I
twice,
played it through three
3 times.
times.
Yeah.
First was the blind run. Second was getting the Maria ending as well as all the collectibles, and then the final one for all the memes. Our
Sure.
favorite, the dog ending and
Yeah. Yeah.
UFO
Yeah.
ending. And through there, and those times obviously took way less. The things you were talking about before.
Yeah.
It was 6 hours for that second playthrough,
Mhm.
and then under 4 hours for the final playthrough of it. And what I noticed there is they are we're just talking about the yellow paint dialogue here.
Yes.
And they note it out for you where they're like, hey, if there's some white flowing sheets and drapes,
Mhm.
look for those.
Yep.
That's probably your next place to go.
Yeah.
And that extent, I think, is actually helpful. And
Sure.
having white sheets blends in already with
Yeah, definitely.
playing with your mind with the huge white borders that we have with the
They're
sheets
so
around the
cool.
town.
I think that's probably the best visual element of the game, or the like.
Yeah.
In my mind, the thing that really stands out to me most as the most ominous, the most eerie, are these big white walls of scaffolding and sheets. I'm not really
Yeah.
sure what it's supposed to indicate in terms
Yeah.
of what was happening in this town,
Uh-huh.
but like reaching the end of just an average suburban town and this 60-foot tall wall of rippling white and like the wind like low hum like coming through it is one of the most eerie images I've seen in a game. And to the point of this game being a remake from also a control level,
Mhm.
being able to tilt the camera down and look at the scale of
Exactly.
the wall towering above you and get up close with the very detailed cloth and
Mhm.
animations and texture work makes it feel even more intimidating.
Yeah, that was going to be the next thing I point out. What I found really valuable about the third person camera in
Yeah.
this game. And again, I feel like we've talked to you about this dialogue before. I love me a set
Yeah.
camera. I
Yeah.
love me a fixed camera.
Totally.
Resident Evil 1 is still one of my all time favorite games.
Mhm.
Silent Hill 1 especially probably is the best utilization
Sure.
of the fixed camera
Yeah.
angles, especially in that opening sequence. But Silent Hill 2 is interesting because it's fixed and it's not fixed.
Sure.
It's always overhead on you. There are some areas where they make it a point, like in tight rooms, like in the apartments
Yeah.
and in the labyrinth, and especially in the hotel around the end of the game. But of course, we're in a different time now. We're
Yeah.
doing a different modern take. So how do we do it, and how do we do it well? We got to meet the game at its level when it does.
Mhm.
And all that detail just comes alive when you realize what the camera's perspective was in Silent Hill 2.
Yeah,
It was
exactly.
always looking down on
Mm.
you, and does a great job to thematically serve the themes and everything.
Sure.
But when you get the chance to look up in this game, it's really spellbinding from how I love a game that makes you feel small.
Sure.
Souls games, especially
Yeah.
with this,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
Silent Hill 2 does this especially well. How towering the trees are around you in the opening
Yeah.
forest
That's a
walk,
great moment.
just walking through the town and seeing the dangling of the street lights
Oh,
around
sure.
you.
Yeah.
When you walk through the hospital and there's a sequence with Maria and she's walking ahead of you and everything crumbles around and it's
Hmm.
raining down on you,
Hmm.
and you just look up and see just how odd we are, how James even got in this scenario in the first
Yeah.
place,
Yeah.
and just everything is made to make you feel so small and tiny,
Yeah.
and they play with scale so well, and it emphasizes the points of crampedness in this game,
Sure.
especially the apartments.
Yeah.
And the apartments was always the place I found the most scary in the original. One, because God, it's so claustrophobic. God, the lighting engine in the original
Sure.
is incredible to the
Hmm.
point where even in emulation, you have to adjust some settings to actually make it work the way it did on the PS2.
Sure.
It's an incredible lighting engine. So, and to make a game that's that dark and
Yeah.
can be that visceral to play, especially now, kind of goes against a lot of modern design philosophies.
Hmm.
But they did it in a way that both feels incredibly, can be very scary,
Yeah.
can be very pressure to you, but also making it seem like you can conquer this, you
Sure.
can go through it. So I think scale that has a big part to play in how wonderful this game
Yeah,
is.
yeah. And you mentioned lighting engine. I think it is important to note that the lighting engine, the physics engine, the texture work, all of this is afforded by Unreal Engine 5, which is this is one of the first major games to use it. I believe Alan Wake 2 was
Yeah.
also in Unreal 5 last year. That's another great looking game, but this is one of the few playing through Silent Hill 2 Remake was one of the few moments where I've really been consistently wowed by just sheer fidelity
Mhm.
in a game. I mean, you get that from like Naughty Dog games or Rockstar games, but not. I mean, I played the medium, but I didn't expect a Bloober Team game to really wow me. Of course, big props to the engine
Mhm.
being what it is and allowing for so much fidelity and quality to be running as smooth as this game does, but also to the team for really squeezing a lot out of this. And what I assume is their first time using this engine.
I believe so, yeah.
There are just moments of I mean, let's combine all of this. What we're saying: the
Mhm.
fog, the lighting engine, the Unreal Engine, all of this makes Silent Hill fog the defining element of Silent Hill is
Yeah.
fucking fog. And the fog is so good in this game. It is so good in this remake because it dynamically reacts and
Mhm.
it meshes around buildings and the way that it like captures light from different light sources and like bleeds it into different colors makes the world feel like it's like enveloping you. And of course, the games have always done that, but it is really Unreal Engine
Yeah.
5 that makes that come alive and feel dynamic and really terrifying.
Yeah, exactly. And I won't. I'm not well equipped to talk about it on the technical side
Yeah,
in
of
terms
course.
of the
Neither am I.
PC player
No,
base.
neither am I.
I really feel for, especially as watching through some of the people streaming the game that have played on PC. I felt so bad how they've encountered such insane stuttering issues,
Mm,
and I think some updates since then have helped fix it.
probably.
But it's crazy how good it felt to me on just the
Yeah.
PS5 in
I had no
general, where I
issues.
barely ran into
No.
much stutter
Yeah.
at all. Always felt bad when someone was just going through the city and exploring the lights. And there's some section in the Silent Hill town where PC players played. I think it's exactly in the section where the street lights are, where all of a sudden the game would just stutter for a couple seconds, and be like,
Hmm.
this is annoying.
Yeah.
But in terms of what Unreal Engine 5 has in the future, yeah, and this was something that, with the amount of fidelity this game has, I think could have easily, the vibe could have of the original could have easily been lost in
Oh,
translation,
sure.
because again, part of that appeal is how lo-fi it is.
Yeah, definitely.
And I guess the thing that sticks out to me, it's almost like being a kid and just finding yourself on like the 8th or 10th page of Google when trying to look through something, and you find yourself on a website where you feel like you shouldn't be on, or going through the YouTube rabbit hole too much and I feel like I shouldn't be here.
Yeah.
And that's one of the elements for why Silent Hill 2 to me is so unnerving more than
Sure.
scary,
Mm.
where it just, number one, can't believe that you're in this situation, like how dark it is.
This is a dark fucking
Yeah,
game.
exactly. And
I
just
remember
that they're even going there, going to
yeah,
these lengths where they're going. But yeah, you go right ahead.
just about the darkness.
Yeah.
This is an oppressively dark game. It of course can swing. Like it's not dark when you're outside in Silent Hill. It's not dark when you're in the forest and things. But specifically the prison section, specifically the labyrinth. There are these few sequences of the game where it's so crazy dark that I'm like squinting at the TV, but it does play with that in pretty fun ways that especially when combined with the sound design of this game, that if you put on your headphones, you're going to be experiencing some crazy shit.
It's
in this
really,
game.
I think one moment that stands out to me early on was I was playing the game right through the apartment section the first night of release. There was some point where my roommate fell asleep, so I was both doing my best to keep playing it because why would I stop the game for 5 minutes to move it over to my room? I want to keep playing.
No,
5 minutes, that's the whole world that could happen at that time. But
James Sunderland might die.
Yeah, he might die. He might
can't let that happen
without me. No, that can't happen. Certainly in none of the endings does that ever happen.
Yeah.
So I'm being very mindful of him. And then there's the point in the apartments where it's funny how some people run into it and some don't. But it's the part where you see Pyramid Head for the first time, and it's not a cutscene. Now, I believe when you said it, you didn't run into him before.
Never saw that.
Yeah. So there's a part where it's just crossed off by iron bars, and he's, well, like the SpongeBob meme, just standing there menacingly with the red light. He reacts to nothing that you do, reacts to no shots that you give with your gun. And the controller rumbles as hard as a controller possibly can.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Huh.
And I feel like if you set it on the floor, it would move like a foot forward if you just gave it enough time. And the radio is blaring to all hell. And it's just so intimidating being there, already set in an apartment where I already feel freaked out if all the lights were to go off in my hallway. I was just so totally immersed in that scene. It made me feel just as uncomfortable as it did in the original when you ran across him like that. But the added thing with the radio being an element on the PS5 DualSense controller is such a cool way to do it. With the rumble that's there, I just felt so immersed in that moment.
Yeah.
And everything the sound design team does through the rest of the game, with whether it be music implementation, the squelching and just wetness of the creatures.
Yeah.
It is unbelievably impressive.
Yeah. And for me, it's especially impressive in the moments where 3D audio design is used in unique ways. There are sequences. Let me know what's the name of like the hellish worlds that you enter. It has a name, right?
Yeah, the other world.
The other world. Yeah, okay. When you enter the other world, things start to go wacky, weird, and crazy, and moans start to happen outside of the walls in places you can't access, and crazy hums that are coming, and like low guttural sounds that are coming from things that you never even see. They'll like play with your mind because, again, I specifically point out that a lot of these sounds come from sources that you will never be able to see.
Exactly.
But because you can hear them if you're wearing headphones in this 3D audio design way, it makes you consider not going down a hallway or if you're more brave, wanting to go down the hallway to see what's down there. But because you feel like you're in a real space.
Exactly.
And even though literally the game ends at that wall, there is nothing modeled beyond that. If you're hearing whispering or a moan or an enemy sound coming from on the other side of the wall or above you, your mind creates the other room that's on the other side of that's filled with guys that you do not want to mess with. Or a skittering above you, you're like, well, there has to be a roof and something's on that roof, even though it's just them like playing with your head with a piece of sound design.
Exactly. Yeah. First of all, video games are modern day magic tricks. Okay. How they go into doing that is incredible. And hats off to that team for doing that. And there's so many areas where they do it so well. I think of obviously the apartments for what we've been talking about. One of the really cool details that I only noticed on my second playthrough was there's some rooms of the apartments where it's almost like a human figure has been burned into the walls.
Oh, sure.
And it's essentially, I think in those rooms specifically, we get the breathing noises that you hear the entire time. And again, it's like they're not literally here, but they are. There's a presence here. I'm in an unwelcome space that I shouldn't be in. That does amazing. The whispering. That's in room 209, which is really cool that they do it where it always happens.
Sure.
In the original, I guess that's part of the urban folklore of that game in general. I believe that was a randomized chance for those whispering sounds to happen when you enter that room. But for it to do it every time, number one, gives people that experience for
Yeah.
that to happen, which
Mhm.
is just so unnerving.
Mhm.
It was like a mystery for almost 10 to 15 years what it was actually saying.
Oh, interesting.
People, I would recommend you looking into it because there's a couple headcans where people thought, is this James' final words? What is he saying? No, it's just it's a stock sound.
Oh, okay.
But the stock sound is
Yeah,
terrifying.
yeah, of course.
The way they implement it is so scary. And then in the hospital as well, especially when we go into the other world,
Mhm.
where we go into those rooms with the heavy breathing
Yeah,
again.
yeah,
There's just always a third force there watching you.
totally.
It's like a horror of being perceived almost.
Mhm. Well, yeah, I actually want to build off of that.
Yeah.
Something you mentioned earlier of this game playing with forms and combining forms in the environment with the sound design to make you feel like there are constantly presences of spirits or what,
Yeah.
like whatever, uh, because they do a lot of interesting things uh, with modeling and shadows and framing. This game does really good things with the camera being placed in a certain angle when you enter a room and having a light shine either from you or from behind something, and it's a chair leaning against the wall in a certain way that makes a shadow, and
Yeah.
and you sort of feel like that could be something. It could be an enemy or a sheet placed on top of something that makes it look like there might be something hiding there.
Yeah.
There were all these moments where I often felt like I was going to be attacked by an enemy because also I think it was only like partway through the first exploration of Silent Hill, the
Mhm.
town, that I turned off the radio because I was playing the game on easy. It wasn't I didn't feel a lot of combat level
Yeah.
pressure because I was playing the game on easy, and so the combat wasn't particularly
Mhm.
difficult for me. But I wanted the chance to be jump scared
Yeah.
by the enemies, and so I was like, okay, I'm turning off the radio, and that even actually immersed me more in the world because I didn't know if something was going to be an enemy or not. Um, because I walk into a room and I see a shadowy figure of some kind, and it might not be an enemy, or it might because I
Mhm.
have the radio off and I have no fucking idea.
Yeah, exactly. The radio's awesome because just like it is in the original, it's a Pavlov's dog effect.
Yeah,
As soon as I hear that sound, I'm primed for terror.
sure.
And they both do it in a great way where you can play the game entirely without the radio, and the environmental design serves its purpose to
Mhm.
make you always feel like there's something there.
Yeah.
Or when you have the radio on, my favorite moments is the radio sets off again. It has the same sound for
Yeah.
everything.
Mhm.
It can be it for a little tiny bug.
Yes,
And
I love the bugs. I thought that was so
Uh-huh.
funny when I realized that there's not a big guy in a body bag or one of those mannequin things that's coming after me.
Uh-huh.
It's like a bug on the wall,
Mhm.
and I'm like, where's the fucking guy? Oh, it's a bug.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, so the bugs are awesome. Like we've talked about before, when the mannequins go completely still,
Yeah.
the radio doesn't go off. And
The
so
mannequins
they're
are so funny.
so great at jump
Yeah,
scaring you. It's such an excellent evolution of what it was in the original game, where
sure.
honestly they were kind of viewed as a bit of a joke enemy because they were arguably weaker than the initial lying figures, the ones that crawl up on you and
Yeah.
barf on you. Because, well, they were just a melee attack enemy,
Mhm.
but they would
Oh, I
stand
see.
there
Yeah, yeah.
menacingly.
Yeah, but they also have this funny thing
Yeah.
that gives them a lot of personality, which I think is interesting. That they'll like run past and then
Mhm.
they'll freeze, and sometimes you'll catch them doing it, which is really
It's
funny.
really funny.
But it can also be a great opportunity for a jump scare of walking down a hallway and seeing something barely through the shadow just like
Yeah.
zip past because they're pretty quick.
They
But
are.
sometimes you'll watch them do their run and then like pose up underneath like in a corner or underneath a desk or something like that,
Yeah.
and you're like, I see you, idiot. Like I'm not falling for your shit, but it
Yeah.
makes them funny, which I know is not necessarily the intent, but I it's still like it increased my enjoyment.
Exactly. And I mean, they are funny.
Yeah, they are.
They willingly play into how ridiculous it is that
Yeah.
these guys do what they do. And that's one of my favorite elements about a lot of these Silent Hill games is they comes to a point where initially the enemy can freak you out.
Mhm.
And then you know what to expect. And then at some point they either throw like 6 at you and you don't know what to expect,
Yeah.
or they put them throughout the room, like in the prison especially, where okay, I fought a mannequin before, but now they climb on the walls.
Yeah.
And now my radio is blaring and I can't see them because they're climbing above me and I don't know what I'm doing.
And
So
it's
I'm
the
just
darkest fucking place I've ever been in a video game.
darkest
Ever.
place I've ever been in. I'm pressing the dodge button the entire time, hoping that my iframes
Yeah.
catches them because they squeal for half a second and then they jump on you, so it's not enough time because I'm already freaked out.
Mhm.
and it's so tense.
Yeah.
It's so great. And they also do the thing that you were talking about where it's really funny because I feel like there's some interactions that are coded in such a way to where you point your gun at them, ready to shoot, they notice you're doing that, and then they run away again.
Hmm.
You catch them for a split second, and it's timed just enough to where when you fire that bullet, it's going to be late
Yeah,
because they just
exactly.
walked into
Exactly.
another room.
Yep. Yep.
It's
They keep you on your
so
toes,
good.
which I think is what this game
Hmm.
felt good at. Is as someone who had not played the original game,
Hmm.
did not know what to expect in terms of areas or
Yeah.
pacing or puzzles or characters or story, as we're talking about. This game was always keeping me on my toes because I didn't know if an area was going to be short or super long,
Uh-huh.
or if I was going to have a set of cutscenes or not, or if there was going to be a new type of enemy or not. I do think that probably my biggest complaint about this game, in the grand scheme of things, and it's not something that really hampers my enjoyment because I understand, but
Hmm.
this game has bad enemy variety. There are really like three enemies that you
Yeah.
fight consistently throughout this game, and when you're playing it for, I think for me it was around 14 hours, for you 18 hours, and you're starting to see those same animations, and you know what James combo is going to be with the fucking plank of wood that he has. It's like, all right, buddy, like I get this. I wish this was spiced up a little more, but I think on the whole, the game does a good job with all its other elements outside of enemy variety,
Hmm.
keeping you on your toes, never knowing what's going to happen around the next corner.
Yeah, exactly. And completely get that criticism too. And even Team Silent in the original understood that, and that's why Silent Hill 3 has a ton of enemies
Oh,
in it.
okay,
Just
interesting.
like in Silent Hill 1, where there's
Yeah.
such an insane amount of enemy variety, almost every single place you go to has a new enemy in
Mhm.
there. So completely understand that for sure. And God, it's just so good, man. I love this their implementation. The Especially how they build on them from the original, which is something that we want to talk about too. Like the nurses in this game are
Mhm.
really awesome. Again, where the original, where they're kind of, if you just boil it down to the ones and zeros of it all, they're a slightly more tankier melee enemy
Mhm.
that will slice at you if you get too close to them and you don't want to be cornered in a
Yeah.
room with them. And this time, I love their walking patterns. I love the rooms that they would set up with the visuals of them. I remember there's one room, I forget if it was in the prison or in the hospital, but there's like three nurses roaming
Mhm.
around. One is just alerted by the television. The other are in
Oh
two
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
corridors. And those are the enemies most susceptible to light. So you can walk through them if you want to.
Sure.
But one of the testaments to me of what I appreciate in a survival horror game, and I think what they capture in Silent Hill 2, is that in the both in the original and in this game, there is never a dearth of resources.
Mm.
By
Yeah.
the end, you're probably likely to have, if you're playing probably on normal difficulty and even on hard, maybe over 10 health drinks,
Sure.
15.
Yeah. You're always getting them,
And
especially if you do
yeah,
like thorough exploration, which both of us are doing.
exactly. Yeah, I ended my game with, there were a couple times in my first run where I had over 100 handgun bullets.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Oh.
in spite of having such a bevy of resources,
Yeah.
you still didn't want to go into that room
Sure.
because you knew it was going to be there. And like for me, I don't know, there's always an inherent pressure. If I hate, that's why the Resident Evil games especially freaked me out when I was a
Mhm.
kid, because I hated knowing that I couldn't finish all the enemies off at one time. I always
Mhm.
had to leave an enemy out there.
Yeah.
And in Silent Hill 2, you always have in all those games, always
Yeah.
have the option to get rid of them. But I hated wanting to leave them out here. I hated wanting to get into a fight with them. It was always so tense, no matter what resources you do, which is
Sure.
just hats off to all the team involved with
Yeah.
that.
It's definitely well balanced. I mean,
Hmm.
even as someone who played it on easy,
Hmm.
um, I still felt like the enemies were scary in their design and their like animation of the way they were like plodding around and things, and they
Yeah.
would jump scare you, or they would send different a couple different types of enemies at you to keep you on your toes. But to the point of exploration that we were mentioning, where we want to comb every single room for a
Hmm.
note or for a health potion or some little bit of lore, uh, I really like. I think that maybe the best small element of this game is James marking the map.
Hmm.
And whenever you learn something about a place, whenever you finish a puzzle, wherever you enter a new area, James will, and you have to attain the map from
Yeah.
the environment. They're like usually they're pretty easy to find, but you have to go grab them. When he gets to the map and he does something, he'll take it out of his pocket, go,
Mhm.
and then he'll put it away, and that's the indication that you know that you've done something, you completed something, or discovered something, and that the map will then reflect that once you take it out and look at it again. I especially like when you're in Silent Hill and you stumble upon the big chasms that Silent Hill the
Mhm.
town has
Mhm.
that are like blocking off a number of the streets, and then he'll like scribble like a black area over that, so you know you can't go that
Yeah.
way. Or once you've unlocked a door, once you've he'll note down like elements of the puzzles. It'll be like jukebox puzzle, and there'll be an arrow pointing to the diner where the jukebox is, and it'll be like jukebox,
Mhm.
and it's like, well, I need to remember that that's there, and then when you finish the jukebox puzzle, it gets scratched out,
Yeah.
and it's just a small detail I think gives James a little bit of personality, but also is easily the defining quality of life feature that this game has over older survival horror games. Of the map is evolving alongside you, and you so you never feel like, oh, have I been there before? Yeah, okay, I know.
Yeah, and I would say that one of the elements that I really like about these games is how they mark up the
Sure,
maps.
yeah,
And I think what I appreciate this one because James does mark things up in the original.
hmm,
It's the same code of rules where the
yeah.
squiggly line, I can't go in
Oh,
there.
true, yeah,
Straight line, I may be able to get in there somehow, but I got to find a method to get in or
yeah. Hmm,
find the locked door or whatever. But in this one, it's always nice where you get the visual cue
yeah.
that he pulled him out itself. And it's also a great source of terror because in the original or in all the OG Silent Hill games, when you pull out the map, the game's paused.
Hmm,
And this one, you pull out the map, it's not paused.
yeah,
Everything's still going on around you. So you get in these tense situations like in the labyrinth where you have, I don't know the enemies' names, but they're the big old guys and they stick right under the grates
yeah,
and they're
yeah, yeah.
trying to poke out and they're trying to get to you all the time. Where I'm trying to remember what room I last went into in that labyrinth level and I'm
Yeah.
pulling out my map and then they get me and I'm a mouse and the
Yeah.
cats are trying to get me and I can't look at my directions of where I'm going,
Hmm,
and they really do an excellent job of that. So I think that visual cue that he marked something
sure.
or putting things in words like the
Yeah, yeah.
jukebox or it was really I think one of my other favorite characterization of Jameson was in the labyrinth where it's the wall of arms and legs
Hmm,
and he just writes on his map strange door question mark, and it's a great way to learn about his character, especially since a lot of
yeah.
the character moments in those games you can in the original you can only find by inspecting environmental detail.
Mm,
And that's one of the things that it can be hard to notice what to expect, what's going to be there's nothing interesting here,
yeah.
or
Oh,
what's
yeah,
going to
yeah.
be a detail about his life.
Hmm,
Um, and we can kind of go into that when they go
sure.
into the story, but it's fascinating the elements that they make more subtle
Hmm.
and which elements they make more apparent.
Hmm. So talk about some of those subtle things that they changed from the
Yeah,
original.
exactly. Well, I think it was kind of there was a couple play sessions because I was playing through the original again right before the remake
Oh,
came
okay.
out,
I didn't
giving
know
it a
that.
second run with having my girlfriend watch and then Sam, my roommate, watch.
Yeah.
And it was really funny as they both point out, and what I agree with, the messaging of what Silent Hill 2 is trying to convey to you, at least for us in the original, is pretty obvious,
Hmm.
right? They watched a little bit of the end of the hospital. Um, the theme of guilt, the thing that James did, it's very obvious and well pointed out there. But it's fascinating. Like especially, I love the scene in Heaven's Night where
Oh,
Maria's
yeah. Yeah,
pouring
yeah.
them a drink.
Hmm.
It's a brand new dialogue scene that's there, and there's the lingering he has over the shot
Yeah.
that Maria just poured out
Very
to
good
him.
moment.
Where again, it's just 5 seconds,
Hmm.
and you can interpret it however how you will, and many people may not have even noticed it. Where it's like this is indicating to a drinking problem, but
Yeah.
I love how they pointed out there. In the original, you may not have known that he had a drinking problem at all because it's really only apparent number one if you connect the lines to the "there's a hole here, it's gone now" line in Neely's bar,
Yeah.
and there's some empty beer cans and beer bottles on one of the upper floors of Heaven's Night in the original where if you inspect it, James points out that there are some nights where he used to do this to soothe the pain,
Oh, sure.
but now I think it's like an ellipses where it's just he tries to stay off of it now as
Mhm.
much as he can. I like the way that they visually interpret that,
Yeah.
maybe more than a little piece of inspectable information that you may not have seen before. I
Mhm.
think that theme just really serves how well they add even more life and breadth to these characters.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's just one element that I like that they made more apparent than the original.
Sure. Yeah. The characters are another great thing
Mhm.
about this game and about this remake that take the original that has been lauded but also memed upon
Yeah.
because of poor voice acting
Mhm.
and some stilted performance moments, and the FMV cutscenes can be corny
Mhm.
at times. But Silent Hill 2 remake is on the level of facial capture fidelity as the best of Naughty Dog and Rockstar,
Yeah.
and did not expect to be saying that going in, especially because the facial animation and facial design was actually, I think, probably the first thing that people were worried about
Yes.
with this game. But as you settle into this game and start watching more and more of these cutscenes and start seeing more and more of the characters, of which is a small cast, but I think feel very well balanced in this game. The facial performance capture is, I mean, I think it's like S tier. I think this is some of the best that I've seen, especially on James and Maria, who
Yeah.
are like the main characters of the game. Two of the best performances I've seen, and combined with great facial capture that allows there to be more nuance and emotion delivered through small moments of not having dialogue, of the way that James shifts his eyes as Maria mentions something, or the way that she will chew her lip or put her hand on her hip or
Mhm.
whatever, and then her hair will react accordingly because
Exactly.
it's all properly animated. That that it really makes them feel like just very real people.
Yeah, exactly. Want to shout out to Angela and Eddie as well.
Yeah, of course.
Eddie, I
Oh,
just
Angela's great. Yeah.
yeah, Angela's fantastic. I'll speak to Eddie first and how I just love the basically bit that James and Eddie do at the
Yeah.
end of all their
Mhm.
conversations.
Or you want me to come with you?
No, I'm looking for
Yeah,
someone.
yeah,
Oh, and
yeah.
then just bringing that more and more and more to the point where Eddie has this shit-eating smirk, and he's like, "Nah, I'm good," and then walks in with his loaded revolver.
Yeah.
It's excellent
Mhm.
there, and then I adore Angela's vocal performance.
Yeah.
It's such, and her character specifically is
Mhm.
part of why just the story in general was not only so revolutionary for its time
Yeah.
in games in 2001, and it's why it's still, at least to me, not only just one of the best horror stories in games ever told, it's just one of the best stories in
Hmm.
games that's ever been told. And the lengths it's willing to go and how much sympathy they give these
Yeah.
characters,
Mhm.
especially Angela.
Mhm.
And I feel so bad, especially for the online hate brigade that was delved against how Angela looked
Yeah.
from the initial trailers to the point where we obviously have these idiots online demeaning the victim of sexual assault
Yes.
for the way that she looks. We
Not something
obviously,
I would do personally.
yeah,
God.
no, just some monsters
Yeah.
on the internet. But I really want to credit that actress. There's so many hard and gut wrenching scenes you have to do, and also imagining her having to do all that while in the mocap suits
Yeah, of
with the
course.
dots all
Yeah,
around
yeah.
you. To have to envision that entire world around and still get such a notable performance like
Yeah.
that, she's excellent.
Yeah.
She's really excellent.
And also similar shout out to the guy who voices and facial captures James Sunderland,
Yeah.
who he's just a guy. He's just an average guy that I think gets a lot, for me, a lot of his personality from how little he reacts to
Yeah.
things. He is placed in some of the most insane scenarios, and why, to me, James Sunderland is a charming, simple character. Narratively, he's quite complex. Emotionally, he's complex, but in terms of his visual design, he's just a guy,
Mhm.
and the way he's not quipping at scenarios. He's just like focused,
Mhm.
and it's the moments in which you get the combined ridiculousness of the Silent Hill scenario of him visiting these crazy places and the other world and seeing these insane things like the wall of arms or sticking his hand in all sorts of nonsense and jumping down holes, and the the facial performance of
Mhm.
the guy who in voices James Sunderland, just he's just like, this sucks. This is tough. He doesn't say that, but you can see it on his face, and then he just does it.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that makes him feel like a really unique character where I wouldn't do any of the things that James Sunderland is doing, but he still manages to feel grounded because he does react to things. I think back to some of the scenarios in the older Resident Evil games where crazy shit is happening, but they're older games, so there's not the voice capture and facial capture that allows you to get personality out of the reactions. But James Sunderland here, he's going through these crazy things, and he still feels like a real guy that's going through these things. Even though I wouldn't do these things, I still believe that someone would if they were driven to it.
Yeah, he's such a well-written character because on one hand, he's true to his word. Yeah. Just as he tells Angela in the graveyard, I guess I don't really care if it's dangerous or not. Well, that's very apparent.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. Everything he does.
Every hole he sticks himself into, my lord, the only hole that stops him is basically the one in the labyrinth with burning water that's in the toilet to grab just another tchotchke that you have to make the lighter. That's the only hole where he bursts back on. Couple story drops, nothing brought to him.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, he's a character who is so completely dishonest with himself because, well, that's why he's in Silent Hill. And then one of my favorite details about how they established that in this game is there's a poster in the hospital that you can read that talks about the signs of depression and how to point that out. And there's obviously, you press the triangle to do the read form where it just gets it in plain text. And in the poster, it talks about feelings of guilt, ? But when you read it just with the plain text, guilt isn't a part of it. They don't show that word there at all.
Oh,
just a great way to establish that James is not feeling these things about himself. He's clearly burying it all away, which could have been, and again, I guess my prevailing thesis on this game is that I think it's an excellent companion piece to the original.
Sure, yeah.
This isn't a Pokemon like Heart Gold Soul Silver situation where just play Heart Gold Soul Silver or Dead Space Remake, which is essentially just a one-to-one thing with better lighting.
Yeah.
In this one, just as I would recommend someone that played the original Silent Hill 2 to play the remake, I would recommend someone that played Silent Hill Remake to play the original.
Sure, yeah.
Because they both display these characters in ways that's a different read or something that's an interesting take on one another. And what I love about this game is all the calls back, not just a callback to the original to be like, well, haha, don't you remember this? They put that as part of the story. Every remembrance that's there, where even you said you had no idea what those scenes mean. You would just press something on the map and it would play a little sound and you're like, why, what is happening? It made you feel odd.
Yeah.
And those things still work for someone that hasn't played it.
Exactly, yeah.
If for someone that has, you're wondering how these things got here. Why is the place where I got the wooden plank in the original boarded up? Why are all the puzzles that I saw before destroyed? And the note I keep thinking about is the one that's in the apartment, and I believe it's before you crawl into one of the doors where it locks you in and you have to solve one of the lockers to get out and investigate everything on the wall. And they write on it where it says, I paraphrasing here, but I've heard you make the same mistakes again and again, and you're just going to keep doing it. Playing on the fact that we might be in a scenario where James has been in a loop for maybe 23 years since the original has come out. A man that's like been permanently in denial for so long. It's incorporated so well, and they even play on that in some of the new endings, which I'll get to later. But he's such a well-written character, and to be able to expand on what was already, I think, a really great written character in the original, that's hard to do. Imagine trying to do like one of your favorite books or favorite games, remake them and add more to that character. That's so intimidating, especially for a game that's been mythologized as it has.
Definitely, yeah. And let's talk in a second about that mythologization, because I think it's
hard word.
Balanced out very well by how earnest this game feels as a remake to me. The fact that it isn't one-to-one, that it does have this reverence for the remembrance moments of the original and the puzzles, and they're not afraid to show their love for this game through character moments, through environmental details, but also to change things up
Mhm.
where it's not expected to. I mean, you can imagine them remaking whatever area's specific puzzle and not changing anything about it, and no one would care.
Yeah.
But the fact that they saw opportunities to merge the original's design and puzzle
Yeah.
concepts with a expanded sense of exploration and puzzle solving and things, that I think it works really well. And to me is not the ideal remake, but
Mhm.
an ideal remake
Yeah.
in that it does still keep the original fresh
Mhm.
for someone. Both versions are fresh, as you were saying, no matter what order you played it. And I saw a lot of people who played the original and come to this one and continue to be surprised, like
Exactly.
expecting, oh, I'm going to go in this door, I'm going to fight this enemy, I'm going to do this puzzle, and then they twist it up a little bit.
Yeah.
And because I playing this game, I was thinking about the fact that I don't think I've ever played, well, almost, I don't think I've almost ever played a remake of a game that I'd
Mhm.
already played.
Yeah.
Because either when a remake comes out, I play the original and then don't bother with the remake. Like the Crash Insane trilogy came out, and I just played the original versions, and I have really no desire to go play the
Mhm.
Insane trilogy. Um, or uh, or I just play the remake because it's the better version, and I just don't really think about playing the
Yeah.
original. And this is a really interesting, and I think probably the most difficult version to balance, of where both versions are still interesting and valid to play, no matter what order you do them in.
Yeah.
And that's an extreme challenge. I think they did very well.
It's very rare. Yeah, I was trying to think in my head if I've done the same thing, but the only thing I can think of is essentially remasters because
Yeah.
I'm not counting Brilliant Diamond and Shining
Yeah,
Pearl.
yeah. BDSP and Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire are two that I definitely played the original and
Yeah,
then the remakes. I mean, Pokemon I kind of consider its own thing,
yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
like, yeah, I played Shadow of the Colossus, never played the PS4
Or
version.
yeah, they had the PS2 original when you
Yeah,
played the PS4 first.
I no, I played the
Oh, really?
PS3 like HD version, but
Oh,
it's
okay.
very similar to the PS2 one. It's really just an upres, and then there's like a
Gotcha.
remake.
Yeah,
Um, but
because that
yeah,
which is the only one I've played. I
oh
haven't
yeah,
played the
yeah.
original PS2 or PS3 one.
Mhm.
I remember that being one of the first games I bought on PlayStation. Being like, I've been in Xbox land for
Yeah,
so
yeah.
long.
Time to
It's
play Shadow of the
time to
Colossus.
play Shadow of the
Yeah, that's
Colossus.
awesome.
It's a fascinating position to be in, and I know we're just going to be in it for more and more as years
Sure.
to come, especially with games that we end up growing up with. But going less on that existential, both fear, excitement, and
Yeah.
everything that goes involved in being it. Just touching on remakes for a brief second, and I talked to you about this before, where I think video games are the best place to do that
Mhm.
because they're the most interesting intersection between art and
Yeah,
technology,
absolutely.
where I think no matter what era we end up going in, I think there's always kind of this desire, even if it's buried within us, to be like, it'd be kind of cool to see this
Yeah.
if it was made now.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the hard part of being like, oh, well, we have to clash between the memories you made when you were a
Mhm.
kid, or not even the memories you made when you were a kid, just the feelings that you had when you were there. It's hard
Sure. Yeah.
to make a companion piece, exactly what Bloober Team ended up doing. Um, so I really commend them for that. I'm always going to be interested in a remake just
Mhm.
because I think it's interesting, and especially
Yeah.
ones that, again, are these companion pieces like this I find so fascinating and interesting. And I
Sure.
felt that way about Resident Evil 2 as well. I think
Mhm.
Resident Evil 2 original is just as
Yeah.
worth playing
Yeah.
as the remake is.
Those two are actually very similar.
Yeah.
Resident Evil 2 and Silent Hill 2, the remakes 2019, 2024. The interesting thing about Resident Evil 2 remake, which is a game that I've played and really enjoyed, and actually was the first Resident Evil game I
Yeah.
played, is that game is what created the survival horror renaissance
Yep.
that we see ourselves in now. Not only did it, combined with Resident Evil 7, which is another game I absolutely adore, revive that series, but Dead Space remake,
Hmm.
Alan Wake 2, and Resident Evil 2, three like all-timer survival horror games,
Yep.
take so much inspiration from
Uh-huh.
Resident Evil 2 remake. And
Yeah.
they saw that game sell 15 million copies, like, well, Jesus Christ, we could do this
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
And I like both Resident Evil 2 remake, even though I have not played the original Resident Evil 2, and Silent Hill 2 remake. I haven't played the original Silent Hill 2 because I still feel like there is value for me as someone who played both of them
Mhm.
to go back and play the originals because
Exactly.
I'm not going to get the same experience. Which yeah, it's a fun balance that they've struck.
Exactly. They'll always be there.
Yeah,
There's no, and Bloober Team has said it themselves, like there's no replacement
yeah,
that's happening.
hmm
And definitely just going off the terms of the online dialogue about this, so much of the vitriol definitely would have been calmed if there was the OG quadrilogy able to play on
yeah,
PS4 and
yeah, yeah.
PS5. It sucks that we have to get to a point where we're emulating something, but you know what? The emulation team, whether you're playing it natively on PC with the fantastic Silent Hill 2 Enhanced Edition,
hmm
which got its last update
Did you play
before.
that?
I didn't end up playing that, but I've seen so many videos on
hmm
it, and that's where a lot of people do their
Yeah,
replays of, where it's like it's just crazy what they're able to do with the bug fixes for a broken PC
yeah.
version to make something that can be readily played today with so many control
hmm
options. Or getting
I
to the
think it's
point,
very possible that we get a Silent Hill original series collection because Konami, that's the one thing they're actually really been good at
yeah,
is collections of their
yeah.
games.
I would hope so, especially even if it just ends up being the ROM with a couple ROM hacks
Yeah,
because they
yeah.
lost the original source code. But that's all been belabored to death
Mhm.
already. But this was the right way to take the series in the direction, especially from what we said early on. That outlook on Silent Hill couldn't have been worse.
Yeah.
Not only coming
Yep.
off its last game being a Diablo clone
Mhm.
on the PS Vita with Book of Memories, along with two or like three other like American made versions of these games, which progressively just went more and more downhill in the
Yeah.
public conscience of it. Then you come out with Silent Hill Ascension, the really weird like TV choose your own adventure thing
Mhm.
with this strange microtransaction system. And then the short message, which I think had really admirable goals to it, and I really credit the creature design and the goals of the team for it, but I don't think ended up working well as a
Yeah. Yeah.
cohesive product. And then to make something that sold 1 million copies in 3 days,
Yeah. It's
and is
back.
only, and it's still like I check the PlayStation store almost every time because the best selling is pretty accurate in terms of what's being there.
Yeah.
And Silent Hill 2 still up there, a
Mhm.
$70 game being with a
Yeah.
bunch of games that are on
Mhm.
sale, the free games, the Fortnites of it all.
Yeah.
It's been hugely popular on YouTube. It it makes me feel good.
Yeah.
I'll just say that much.
Yeah. And because it also just means that there's going to be a lot of exploration of those older games as people are inspired by
Mhm.
really enjoying this one to check out
Yeah.
the older games, and that's certainly the case with me. Though I had some experience with the older games before that. This I remember working at the library. What was it? 3 years ago, something like that. 2 years ago, and hearing online that I think they had a Silent Hill presentation of some kind, and hearing that they were doing a Silent Hill 2 remake,
Yeah.
that they were going to be doing Townfall and
Mhm.
F, and they announced like four Silent Hill. Like they announced a movie there as well,
Yep.
which I don't think we've heard almost anything about since then.
It's still looking for someone to distribute it. It's
Uh,
basically made already.
oh, okay, interesting. And I sat there and I sent a message. I think I made a tweet of something to this effect. I'm like, I I think this is ridiculous that Konami is putting this much effort into it because no one to that point, I did not know anyone who cared about Silent Hill.
Yeah.
I knew that Silent Hill 2 was one of the best games of all time, but it was always kind of talked about in like vagaries
Mhm.
because like I couldn't have told you James Sunderland's name at
Yeah.
that time. The series had been so backgrounded for so
Mhm.
long that I reacted with like confusion at why are they doing like a four project like full force reboot? You're fucking Konami. You like a few years before that you did Metal Gear Survive. Like you should not be doing this.
No, yeah.
But to see this pay off and see this game be one of my favorites of this
Mhm.
year, to be selling very well, to have an incredible Metacritic score, I think it shows real potential
Yeah.
for the Silent Hill IP to be revived through this game into a movie, into some other smaller projects that they've been working on, that different teams have been working on, but also for Konami. Hopefully, I think this gives people a lot of faith about Metal Gear
Mhm.
Delta coming out next year, and people full faith restored in Bloober Team.
Yeah.
Like, oh wait, they did this.
Yeah.
Oh, they can do something. Like, then I'll be looking forward to the
It
next
was
game.
really funny, that quote where they said they're done making shitty
Yeah, yeah,
games. Where it's like it's okay to feel some humility. I
yeah,
know we're all in
yeah,
part of a joke, but if you're proud of those games, be proud of those games.
yeah.
It's definitely been a huge 180 on everyone's thoughts at
Yeah.
that time, and all credit to them. I want to ask you,
Yes.
kind of in the wrap of our ideas,
Mhm.
because you talked about previously if you had any questions about some thoughts on how I feel about the original versus
Mhm.
this one. Was there anything more you want to talk about the story? Because we kind of ended off with just the discussion of James' characterization.
Yeah.
And I guess maybe for you for the first time,
There's a lot going on.
yeah.
What?
How do you view this? How did you like the story? Was it enrapturing you to the same way that it enraptured me?
I think I like it as a story that can have multiple readings.
Mhm.
I think it brings up some interesting thematic things. I like how mature the themes and content of the way the characters have had their histories and mental illness and abuse and things that play into
Mhm.
their personalities. I think that I am also someone who doesn't get much out of something being presented in like a more poetic way. And in Silent Hill 2, to its credit, made me not particularly care about that. But this is definitely a game and a series that is very much about symbolism,
Mhm.
about not necessarily describing exactly what's happening, and you open a door and you end up in another place and it doesn't actually make sense.
Mhm.
And Silent Hill has this history, but does it really? I find that uh I respect it a
Yeah.
lot, but I think the reason why I wouldn't say I love the narrative of Silent Hill 2 is
Mhm.
because it's presented in poetic vagaries, and everything is a metaphor for something else, and there isn't necessarily a reality for like what happened here exactly. Of course, there's also multiple endings, which I'm not a massive fan of in
Yeah.
games, but it was still something that I was compelled by the characters,
Mhm.
and I liked James' performance, as I was saying, and I think Angela and Maria and Laura and Eddie are well acted characters and well written characters, and so from a character point of view, I can talk about the characters quite a bit, but I find it hard to like push myself to be like, oh, what do I think this means? Because
Sure.
I have no fucking idea. Like this is the kind of like you finish like a David Lynch movie or whatever the
Yeah.
fuck, and it's like, well, he doesn't even know what the ending is. I'm like, well, then I don't give a fuck. Silent Hill 2 edges on that for me, but also I still do really like it
Yeah.
in almost every facet.
Yeah. Were there any questions that you had about that you wanted to answer, or was it mostly just like, I know that this is kind of symbolism for something. I like what it's going for, but on my level, I'm not as into going into it more.
I think it's kind of what it is, and but I do see this being a game that I think back on, and I hope that gets more conversation over the years and sparks more conversation about its themes and content and story that I will learn about over time,
Yeah.
and also as I explore the other rest of the Silent Hill franchise, then I will understand more of what goes into making the series what it is. But I have pretty limited experience with it now, so it still feels kind of daunting to me.
Exactly. Yep. And when we're talking about going more to the series, a lot of it is going to be predicated on how these new ones end up turning
Mhm,
out. Because I have
mhm.
no idea what the connection with Townfall is going to be, or what Forte F, whatever
Yeah,
they're
yeah.
calling it, is going to be.
Mhm.
As we've talked about previously before, there's definitely a connection between 1, 3, and 4
Yeah.
with the presiding cult of it all. But even then, those stories are pretty simple A to B, and what makes them so fascinating is the thematic elements
Yeah,
that come
yeah.
in between all of them.
Mhm.
So I'd definitely be interested, and I hope you end up
Yeah.
going through them yourself.
Oh,
And
yeah, I want
to
to.
any of the viewers here, if you have the means to do so,
Yeah.
play through them because they're really interesting.
Yep.
They're just some of the most interesting games in this genre, and I hope
Yeah.
with as Silent Hill taking off, we have like the Clock Tower
Oh, yeah,
remaster
that's
remake
true.
that's coming up. Siren just got a brand new
True.
PS5 version with the off of the PS2 port.
Mhm. Alan
I
Wake
hope
is
it.
back.
Yeah, I hope it brings just a renaissance for these really cool games like Rule of Rose that's been
Oh, sure.
stuck on PS2 for a
Mhm.
while, or even to an extent. I know a lot of people, like especially on TikTok, funny enough,
Hmm.
the Alice video games have gone like a
I don't even know
brand
what
new.
that is.
Yeah, they've gotten a brand new fandom, and it's interesting how a lot of the fandoms, and even we joked in the beginning
Yeah.
where I have my Silent Hill rug, I got that before I played the game. I just like the aesthetic of it.
Sure. Yeah, fair
So
enough.
even though I can make fun of people that only played through Silent Hill by watching a YouTube video
Yeah.
essay of it,
That
that was kind of me.
Yeah, yeah.
And I get it because the aesthetic's awesome.
Yeah, totally.
So I hope it brings back for all these franchises, because I think we're in a much better place when we're doing things really interesting in these genres.
Sure.
It's interesting how the horror genre in games can kind of get into an artsy, really artsy
Hmm.
place. Um, really hope it brings more into that. I
Yeah.
guess that one prevailing snowball thought that I had to myself before we end up where we end things. Did you have any questions on me with anything related to the how I viewed the original and the remake, or maybe any implications on the whole?
Uh, talk a little bit about the endings because I know you
Yep.
said you wanted to sort of close out with that earlier. Do you have an ending that you see as like your favorite or canon?
Hmm.
And then what are like thematic readings that you get out of it?
Yeah, exactly. And that's where I think one of the coolest parts about how James is characterized in the original and how he's characterized in the remake. It's
Mhm.
kind of been a joke online that James in the remake kind of has this hurt dog mentality.
Yeah.
You can almost imagine his face on a little Labrador that just got its foot stubbed, and it's just like, oh man. Because in the original, it's really easy to, and completely fair, to read James as a complete monster.
Sure. Hmm.
He has sympathy for other characters, like especially Angela in the original,
Yeah.
and Laura, but just as the camera displays James being so tiny in this world, and just as all the readings you can get seems like, wow, this guy really has done a lot of really bad things.
Hmm.
It's really easy to see the in water ending, where James
Yeah.
drives into
Hmm.
the river and commits suicide along with his dead wife in the backseat of his car, as the central ending to it all. It
Sure.
kind of feels like what he deserves, especially in the original. And it was interesting because the original voice actor, Guy Seehee, talked about it. He was asked a similar question of what he viewed the prevailing ending to be in Silent Hill 2. And he himself said he loves the hope of leaving with
Yeah.
Laura,
Hmm.
but he said he felt like the team put the most effort into In Water,
Okay.
and In Water kind of became the OG version of what most people viewed as this. We would like to believe Leave happened, but he
Sure.
probably ended up committing suicide
Sure.
in the
Yeah.
game. And it's interesting how James is such a more sympathetic figure in Silent Hill 2
Sure.
remake.
Yeah.
And I like that read because I think
Yeah.
that's, well, gosh, that's the, putting it nicely, it's the grayest of gray characters you could
Hmm.
possibly write.
Yeah.
This is someone who's committed a heinous crime.
Hmm.
Because when I originally played through it, I wondered if they changed it to where Mary and James agreed upon a mercy killing.
Hmm.
But no, that wasn't the case. It was Mary in her times of intense pain and conflict talked about just wanting to die.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
James took matters into his own hands while she was sleeping and
Hmm.
did that. It's a monstrous act, but to do it in a way where he so clearly cares for Angela. He does care for Eddie.
Yeah.
He's and in making sure that Laura's safe the entire time while beefing with her, calling them a fart face and
Yeah.
everything like that. It made me really want to see him through the end. It made me
Sure.
really want to get Leave. And I originally got the End Water ending for the
Hmm.
first time, and I would have been happy with that like regularly and then gone to the other endings there. But on that night, I was like, no, I want Leave. I
Yeah.
want to see James make it out, especially that final dialogue he has with Mary/Maria on the top of the roof.
Sure.
And one of my favorite line readings where Maria's hands are on his face and he's like, Maria, this has to stop.
Sure.
Or the line readings with Pyramid Head where I know why you're here now. It's
Hmm.
time to end this. I like Bloober Team's read on it. I like viewing James as this really sympathetic character, and
Sure.
especially wanting to see him go on after the fates of what happened to Eddie and the fates of what happened to Angela.
Yeah.
So I think that was a really interesting way that they did it, and it's also really funny that for the objectively worst ending of that game, leaving with Maria, just
Hmm.
a real asshole move on your part. Um, they make that ending so short. There's no satisfaction you get from leaving with Maria. It even ends to a point where it's like, did they mean to cut it off this early? And I think they did.
Yeah.
Because it's basically just them calling you an asshole.
Sure. Yeah.
And I find that really bold to do that to a player that may have been playing that game for 14, 15 hours
Hmm.
and may have gotten to the point where they don't know that they can maybe cheese it by looking at the pictures of
Yeah.
Maria the
Because
entire
no one
time.
knows that.
No one
Yeah.
knows that. I think it treats the player with such respect,
Mm.
just as the original does, just as all these games do, but
Yeah.
with the modern sensibilities to make a game, and even what we talked about before, fantastic accessibility options
Oh, yeah.
as well in this.
Mhm.
I think it treats the player with so much respect, and that's
Sure.
why I respect it so much.
Yeah. I think that's a great way to end it. About a great game that I think really deserves accolades in almost every area. I really hope that in the way that Resident Evil 2 Remake and Resident Evil 4 Remake have received across the board critical acclaim, especially at like Game of the Year award shows and things. I hope that this also is able to stick up there because I think that it's an achievement of a
Hmm.
game. I think it's an impressive way to do a remake. I think it's an impressive way to reboot a franchise because this ostensibly is a reboot.
Yeah.
Uh, it's a great way for a team that had been maligned for years to give themselves a new lease on life. And now I'm really excited for Chronos: The New Dawn because they have another game coming out next year. That's fucking crazy.
Chronos Hive, where we
Uh,
at?
but thank
Get
you very
ready to get
much.
croned.
Thank you very much for joining me. Thank you very much, everyone, for watching. Go play Silent Hill 2 if you haven't. That's my recommendation.
Exactly. Right there at you.